Back with me now to discuss this is criminal defense attorney LaDon Jones and Judge Ashley Wilcott. And in San Diego, joining us is Vikas Bajaj. All right, guys, so I'm going to go with you first, Vic, in San Diego. What were your impressions of Jane Doe number 3's testimony?
Well, I had a chance to stop by yesterday in court and listen to her testimony through the translator. And it is very interesting, as we've discussed before, when a witness testifies through a translator, the cadence and the sort of I gotcha moments really aren't as vibrant as they would otherwise be. I felt her testimony to be quite weak, frankly. She identified tattoos on the individual starting at around the area where Mr. Winslow Jr. has his tattoos, but described him to be blue as in the color of the American flag. Now, of course, that, I believe, is not the color of the tattoos that Mr. Winslow Jr. has. I also think her lack of identification of actually putting her eyes on the face of the individual may end up coming to fruition as being an important part. But let me also say that the prosecution has the ability now to call other types of witnesses, such as geolocation witnesses, if Mr. Winslow Jr. had a cell phone with him at the time, or other witnesses to put him there at that time and place. But generally speaking, as an attorney who handles these cases to trial quite often, I'll tell you, even with the combination of Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, I felt that testimony to be quite weak, frankly.
Well, one more follow-up, Vic. How do you think Jane Doe number 5 will help Jane Doe number 3, since you consider her case a little weak? Jane Doe number 5 is also the 77-year-old woman from the Crunch Fitness gym who said that Winslow exposed himself sort of in the same nature. And she was very, very adamant on the facts. She was able to identify Winslow. Do you think that, given the cumulative effect of all 5 coming together in one trial, will help Jane Doe number 3?
It'll help the prosecution's case, and actually you raise a very astute point, and that is the elephant in the room. This is why defense attorneys fight so hard to keep numerous unconnected acts out of the same juror's purview. Yes, it will bolster Jane Doe number 3. It'll bolster Jane Doe number 1, 2, 4, and as well self-corroborating number 5. And that's the danger. If you separate all of these cases, then you have quite weak cases. Now, the issue with Jane Doe number 5 is quite important for the prosecution's theory of their case, because that sheds light on what they will argue, I believe, regarding the intent of Mr. Winslow Jr. In other words, this is an individual that's looking at very serious criminal charges. He's released on a substantial bond, and then this issue takes place soon thereafter while he is on release. Now, astute defense counsel will do their best to really pry into the history here on why that identification made by that lady, Jane Doe number 5, was so strong and why she was so convinced it was Winslow Jr. Here in San Diego, we have to understand that Winslow Sr. has been an icon both nationally and locally here. Winslow Jr., not as much. However, since this case came to be, there has been an enormous amount of media attention, frankly, on the case, and I would be hard-pressed to believe that an individual can sequester themselves effectively from all of that news media coverage. In other words, we also saw this with Jane Doe number 1, I believe, when Jane Doe number 1 said, well, Winslow Jr. looked a bit different during the preliminary hearing than he does here in trial. He had a shaved head. Well,
right.
We know the only types of photographs that we've seen proliferated through the public are those from his college football days when Mr. Winslow Jr. in fact had a clean-shaven head. But he did not have his head, and he did not appear that way during the preliminary hearing.
Vic.
So you have a lot of issues with Yes.
Vic, let me get to LaDon real quick, because I definitely don't want to forget this point you brought up a while ago with Jane Doe number 3.